Look at this. A New York City woman is accused of getting married 10 times over the last 11 years. Well, she's pled not guilty to charges of filing a false marriage license. What is all this about? Brian Yennis has more from our New York City newsroom. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Eric. Well, that's right. 39-year-old Liana Barrientos has been married 10 times since 1999. Actually, she currently has 4 husbands. And at one point, she was married to 8 men at the same time. Now the alleged serial bride is facing 2 felony fraud charges in the Bronx, New York, for filing a false marriage license in 2010 where she stated it was her first and only marriage. Clearly not. Prosecutors say Barrientos was running in an immigration scam, charging a fee to marry the immigrant men, 6 of whom filed for green cards, largely within a month after their weddings. There are security concerns because 7 of the men she married came from so-called red-flagged countries suspected of harboring terrorists, including Egypt, Turkey, and Pakistan. In fact, her 8th husband, Rashid Rajput, was deported back to Pakistan in 2006 after a joint terrorism task force investigated him for making threatening statements against the U.S. In 2002 alone, she married 6 times in different cities throughout New York State, getting hitched on Valentine's Day to a man from Georgia, then 2 weeks later to a man from Turkey, and then 2 weeks after that to another man. Wearing a wedding ring on Friday, Barrientos pleaded not guilty, telling investigators, according to the New York Post, she only remembers marrying 2 of the men. She was released without bail, but then remarkably rearrested right after leaving court Friday, caught with her niece trying to sneak onto a New York City subway without paying a fare, reportedly telling the officer who arrested her, quote, "Didn't you see me on TV?" She was released without bail again. If convicted of the felony charges, Barrientos faces up to 4 years in prison. She'll be back in court May 18th. Eric?
Okay, Brian. 8 million stories in the naked city. This is one of them.
Exactly
Thank you.
right.
You can say that again. All right, Eric. So for more on this, let's bring in our legal panel. David Wohl is a defense attorney and a senior associate at Wallen and Clark. Rachel Self is an attorney and founding member of the Rachel Self law firm in Massachusetts. Good to see both of you.
Hi, Arthel.
Good to see you.
You know, Rachel, let's start with you. I mean, there are people out there going, how could this happen? I mean, isn't your marriage recorded with the courts? And if this is done for immigration status, I mean, shouldn't you have to stay married for a certain period of time in order for that status to stick?
Yes, absolutely. And you do need to stay married for a certain amount of time in order to receive any sort of immigration benefit. But this woman's goose is cooked. And it's not just cooked, it's flambéed. Forget the fact that she's obviously crazy for marrying somebody 10 times. But you have this situation where she's doing all kinds of scams here. And she's looking at potentially having the Department of Homeland Security investigate her for federal immigration fraud in addition to the state charges.
Yeah, and David, I want to bring you into the conversation. And while we do that, let's pop up a map. Brian Yennis just reported on some of the countries where these grooms are natives of. We're talking about Egypt, Turkey, Georgia, Pakistan, Mali, the Czech Republic, Bangladesh. This is according to the district attorney's office. So, David, again to you, can she face terrorism charges? And if so, what kind of penalty would apply? Or would terrorism charges be far-fetched or an overreach?
Yeah, I think it's far-fetched. I mean, she would have to have knowledge that these men intended on engaging in terrorism before they actually married her and intended on engaging in the plot when they came to the United States. There's no evidence that that happened in this case. She may want to try an insanity plea for marrying 10 men, but I got to say, I think this is nothing more than a state case. It's one of the oldest scams in the books. It's unsophisticated. It's low level. It's man pays woman $10,000, $25,000. You marry me so I can get to the greatest country on the planet, the United States of America. It's been happening forever, but the feds have ramped up their enforcement of it over the last 10 or 15 years because of 9/11. But this woman has been getting away with it for 15 years. So what does that tell you? Very poor cross-checking in New York between the various counties and cities regarding the marriage licenses. That's what has enabled it to happen. That's what needs to be fixed. But in the end, it's a probation case.
Yeah, this is a probation case, but it could have turned out worse, Rachel. I mean, look, this lady is facing 4 years in prison. You know, I mean, you know, is that long enough? Does the punishment fit the crime? But also, how much attention should be paid to this system that's clearly broken?
Well, there is No, well, as far as the marriage licensing system, perhaps that's broken. But let's not forget the immigration system, and actually receiving an immigration benefit based on marriage to a U.S. citizen is quite a sophisticated system. And you can only petition for a benefit after being actually married to a U.S. citizen. If your marriage is less than 2 years old, you only receive conditional residency. You have to file numerous forms. You have to pass an in-person interview with highly trained federal authorities. So I think there might be more here than meets the eye as far as how much immigration benefits ultimately were received. The news indicates that a lot of these men were ultimately rejected, and it's ICE that notified the local Brooklyn DA's office of this woman and of this information. So I think the feds are doing their job here, and they might look at federally prosecuting her.
Well, let's go back to the counties then, David. I mean, do you think any of the county workers should be held liable for not paying attention and allowing this woman to get married multiple times?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, they just simply don't have the infrastructure to be able to detect this kind of fraud being perpetrated. And besides, it is extremely difficult to sue governmental entities or hold them responsible either criminally or civilly for something like this. They have immunity, and so I don't think that's going to be the issue. The bottom line is, Rachel's absolutely right. It's very difficult for the marriage scheme to actually pan out to a citizenship for the person who's not a resident. It's become much more difficult over the years. But the thing is, Ms. Barrientos, didn't know that, and neither did these men. They thought, well, I'll just come to America, get married.
Not to mention, David, but hang on.
Oh my God!
No, Rachel, hang on though.
They
guys,
didn't know
listen to
about
me. I'm short on time.
Sophisticated requirements.
David, short on time. This is important because even if this woman, Barrientos, didn't realize that these guys, you know, that the immigration status wouldn't stick, if they were here, coming here to do harm to Americans, they're already here via her, you know, access through her. So that's problematic. Even if they're going to get kicked out 2 weeks later, 2 months later, they're here.
Agreed.
And they could do harm.
But immigration did. Immigration did do their job, and the Department of Homeland Security actually did deport a gentleman back in 2006 who was one of her spouses back to Pakistan. So, I mean, the system is working. They are catching these people, and that's how she was caught.
But we do applaud our federal workers who are, you know, keeping us safe. David, last word, 10 seconds or 20. Go ahead.
You know, I agree completely. I mean, this is going to be, bottom line, though, is a low-level crime and probably probation, no jail time, and maybe marriage counseling for her. I don't know.
David Wool, Rachel Self, thank you so much to both of you.
Okay, thank you, Arthel.
Yep.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.